Lululemon Hottie Hot Shorts. Get into it. When the fit flatters from every angle, you can make whatever play you choose.
Go beyond the headlines with the new MSNBC app. Read, watch, listen to breaking news and analysis anytime, anywhere. Go beyond the what to understand the why. Download the new MSNBC app now.
Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. Tonight's lead, difficult decisions. This evening, President Biden is at Camp David, where, according to NBC News reporting, he is discussing the future of his presidential campaign with family members. The president has come under fire for his feeble performance at last week's debate. Several major newspapers in their editorial boards have called for him to step aside. But so far, most Democratic lawmakers have kept their criticisms private. Meantime, the conservative-dominated Supreme Court is set to wrap up its controversial term tomorrow morning with a ruling on one of the session's most consequential cases. The justices will determine whether or not former President Trump enjoys constitutional immunity at a time when he has already been convicted of 34 felonies in New York and is still facing 3 more criminal cases. Republicans has vowed to stand by their candidate regardless of the extent of his legal liabilities. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Nikema Williams from Georgia. Congresswoman, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having this important discussion, Reverend Al. Always happy to talk.
Now, let's start with the fresh NBC reporting on President Biden tonight. According to the story, there's an understanding among top Democrats that Biden should be given space to determine next steps. They believe only the president, in consultation with his family, can decide whether to move forward or to end his campaign early. Now, in spite of this, your hometown paper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, joined the New York Times yesterday in calling on Biden to step aside. We spoke to DNC Chair Jamie Harrison on this program yesterday, and he says he's not hearing from voters or from party members that Biden should go. What are you hearing?
So, Reverend Al, I'm glad that the AJC doesn't get to decide who becomes president. That's up to the voters of this state. And I don't recall the AJC calling for Donald Trump to drop out after he tried to overthrow the 2020 elections. I don't remember the AJC telling Donald Trump to drop out when he literally asked for 11,780 votes to overturn Georgia's results. The AJC still was silent when Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts. And so that now we have President Joe Biden, who's done a tremendous job as president. He had a bad debate night. I'm not going to negate that. Like, we all saw that. But 3.5 years, I was there for all of them, Reverend Al, in Congress. So I know the transformational work that Joe Biden has done. And the voters of Georgia that I'm hearing from in my district, in this state, we are standing behind our president. As long as he's on the ballot, Joe Biden will get our votes, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that we defeat Donald Trump once and again.
Now, I personally have spoken out and said Biden's debate performance was disappointing, but I will not let that overshadow the fact Trump used the debate to lie through his teeth. And
lie after lie after lie.
Absolutely. And in your home state, I mean, I was troubled by Biden appear to look like he finished 1 or 2 sentences. But I was more alarmed by the sentences Trump did complete. I mean,
right, Reverend Al, this election is not about style, it's about substance. Who do you want? The policies. We have 4 years of a record from both candidates. And I stand behind President Joe Biden and the policies that he's enacted every day of the week. He has a plan for working families, not dividing our country and taking us back to the past. We have Donald Trump, who is bragging and said overturning Roe v. Wade was a great thing. Yeah. Whereas we have a president in Joe Biden who is waiting and willing to have a Democratic Congress to send him the reproductive freedom, Women's Reproductive Health Act, so that he can codify Roe v. Wade. But we have a clear contrast, Reverend Al. And so I'm not going to allow 90 minutes on the debate stage to negate what I have seen and known President Biden to do over the 3.5 years that I've been serving as a member of Congress. And then President Biden showed up to my watch party with the Democratic Party of Georgia immediately following the debate and talked to every person in the room, took pictures that everyone who wanted a picture, and then went to North Carolina, had a rally with a big crowd of supporters, and showed up the next morning for a big rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he was strong and forceful.
Yeah. And see, the point that I think people must hone in on, in your home state of Georgia, where Trump is due to stand trial for trying to overturn the 2020 election, there's seemingly no end to the depths of deception. I've been reading the stories about Rocky Jones, the owner of a Buckhead barbershop, who says he got tricked into holding a Trump event, and now his business is suffering. I don't think anyone's business should be targeted for their politics, but isn't honesty the real election in this campaign? I preached this morning in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. People are saying, wait a minute. Trump said the black jobs. What's a black job? Migrants are coming to take black jobs. So I guess we're not CEOs. We're not entrepreneurs. We're not media executives. We just do the jobs that he's claiming that migrants do, just like he calls African countries and Haiti S-hole countries. I mean, the racism that he's gotten away with is unimaginable in these times.
Well, Reverend Al, my black job right now is saving democracy. And that's why I am standing with my president, Joe Biden, to make sure that we continue to have the conversations with people all over the state and all over the country to remind them of the work that we've done. But what we can't forget is Donald Trump has shown us who he is. He's a failed former president. He's been indicted. He's been convicted. He's been impeached. And also, if you look back to his past, think about when the now exonerated five, once known as the Central Park Five, right, he called for them to be executed. This man has shown us who he is time and time again, and that's why it is imperative that we come together and realize what's at stake and re-elect President Joe Biden.
And I might add the exonerated five case, Central Park Five, that I worked on. That was the only racial involved case in New York that he ever opened his mouth about in 40 years. He never stood up on any of the cases where blacks were the victims. He bought newspaper ads that call on the death penalty for those young men. And he had laryngitis in every other race case in the last 40 years in New York. And I've never seen a black executive in the Trump organization at the top of the executive parts of that company. It's kind of hard to be in business in New York and not do business with black business people. But now let's talk about the conservative. I want to get to this because I'm running out of time. The conservative-dominated Supreme Court, Congresswoman, which has extended its session beyond the usual end date and saved for its last day a ruling on presidential immunity, which is critical to criminal cases against former President Trump. They're moving forward before the election. He can't do it because this court has held up this decision until now, including the case in Georgia. What are your thoughts about what's at stake in this immunity decision and many other controversial decisions we've seen from the High Court in recent weeks?
Ravenel, regardless of the ruling, it won't change the facts. Donald Trump is already convicted of 34 felony counts, convicted, not just charged. And we've seen everything that he's done. So we understand what's at stake. This man said that he would be a dictator on day one if he enters the office. When people show you who they are, we should believe them the first time. That is why the American people rejected Donald Trump and his self-obsessed quest for power in 2020, and that's why we need to do it again. We need to re-elect President Biden because we're about moving this country forward, not taking us back to a time that Donald Trump wants to take us to so that he can be that dictator on day one. It does not matter what happens with the Supreme Court. We still understand our job at hand.
All right. Thank you, Congresswoman Nikema Williams. Now to a new CBS YouGov online survey of registered voters taken 2 days after the first presidential debate on Thursday. It finds the number of Americans who think President Biden has the mental and cognitive fitness to run for president has fallen 8 points from earlier this month, while the number who think he has risen 7 points. We should note those numbers are still within the margin of error, and many pollsters believe it will take more time to fully gauge the impact of the debate. Joining me now to talk about it is Ryan Wiggins, Chief of Staff for the Lincoln Project, and Basil Smikle, a political analyst. Basil, let me go to you first. Digging into the numbers, Black Democrats remain the strongest supporter of Biden's continued candidacy. But we know from other polling that support from the key voting bloc of blacks has wavered a little since 2020. Do you think Biden's debate performance will cause him more problems with black voters, especially young men?
You know, look, I think as the Congressmember said earlier, that we all saw that debate performance. And if you're a voter, particularly a black voter, that wants to see your president fight for them, you know, maybe you didn't get that in the way that you wanted to hear it the other day. But I think the day after, in North Carolina, and particularly being introduced by a teacher who had his student loans forgiven and who's African-American, tells voters what they need to know, as the Congresswoman had said before, that he has a record. Joe Biden has a record. He has a record that involves working in communities of color and delivering for Black and brown communities. When you put that up against the alternative, Donald Trump, who said that he's open to the idea, or at least pitched the idea, of migrants fighting each other like gladiators to be able to stay in this country. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. So I do think that even if there's some softness in the first couple of days, that those numbers will turn around as we get closer and closer both to the convention and to the election.